Hey, are you guys ready to elevate your DIY skills? Well, of course you are. That's why you're here. I'm so excited to announce the HouseCalls Premium Ad-Free Membership. What is that? Well, you get a bunch of great stuff. You get exclusive member-only content. You can join me for live streams. We've got exclusive contests, sweepstakes, of course, easy-to-follow videos as well. Now, we've got a free 7-day trial. Just go to members.housecallsdiy.com.
We make things. We use our hands, minds, and machines to build, to fix, to improve. We're known as do-it-yourselfers, home improvement fans, fix-it fanatics, inventors. At our core, though, we're all makers. So let's jump in and make something. Hi, I'm Ron Hazelton. Welcome to the show. Today we're going to widen the doorway between an entry hall and dining room, making the two spaces more connected and visually joined. Then I'll show you how to add a whimsical look to a chair using wipe-on colored finishes. Next, we'll construct what I consider to be the ideal workshop rack for holding screwdrivers. And finally, several useful tips and techniques for cutting multiple pieces of wood to precisely the same length. You know, when it comes to home improvement priorities, it seems to me sometimes that men are from Earth and women are from, well, someplace else in the universe. Okay, I know I'm stereotyping, but I have to say my personal experience with our own home does bear this out. Now, we haven't even moved into this house yet, and while I'm concerned about getting up the child gates, my wife Lynn is already deep into remodeling plans. So deep, in fact, that she's called in local architect Pat Miller, who's done several remodeling projects around here. Pat's mission? To hear Lynn out on her feelings about our yet-to-be-lived-in home.
When you turn here, this is the snaky thing. You turn, you turn, you turn.
What's a hallway?
And then you're turning again, and then it's just like it needs to be more spacious.
Well, I think this is a small doorway.
Yeah.
If this was open to your dining room, just a bigger opening.
You mean if we just made this bigger?
Yeah. To here.
Uh-huh.
You would feel like the room extends from one space
So it's
into
almost
the
like part
other.
of the hall.
Right. You don't need this.
Can we do that, Ron?
What?
He's numb. He's numb.
Now, Pat the architect has said I can create a whole new spacious feeling in this hallway here if I'll just widen this doorway, this entry to the dining room. Now, she's also said I can create a spacious new feeling in the kitchen by knocking out the rear wall of the house. And given those two choices, I think I'm going to choose widening this doorway. Now, I'm going to start by taking off this door casing right here. And because it was just painted, regrettably so, and caulked, I want to cut through the caulk and paint right here where the casing meets the door jamb. I'm going to cut down this side. Next, I drive in a wide putty knife to protect the drywall as I loosen the trim with a curved pry bar. Now I'm about to deface my home by cutting a great big hole in my wallboard here, but I have a couple of concerns. One is I'm almost certain that there's a water pipe in here that's supplying this fire sprinkler head up here. And then if you look around here on the other side of the doorway, you'll see that there's a switch right here. So I've probably got both pipes and electrical wires in here. So before I do anything drastic, I'm going to cut a little inspection hole. Using a small piece of wood as a template, I outline the inspection hole and cut it out using a drywall saw held at an angle. In a moment, I'll explain why I'm making the angled cut. Well, from here, this hole looks pretty clear, but I don't trust what I can't see. So I'm going to kind of play dentist here for a second, put this mirror in, and look around. And aha, you see that orange pipe over there? That's the sprinkler pipe. There's the electrical box and the armored conduit. So at least I know where these are now, and I can be careful as I cut out a bigger hole. Now remember I cut that bevel on the edge of the inspection hole? That's because if I had decided after looking in here I didn't want to go forward, I could use this as a patch, and the bevel would keep this from falling through inside the wall. I could simply cement it in place with some joint compound. No, partly because I've got some wires and some pipe in here, and partly because I just love tools. I'm going to use this rotary cutting tool to actually cut out the wallboard. Now this orange pipe is the fire sprinkler system for the house. I've deactivated it, and I'm going to cut it and take it out. Well, we've got this side of the wall pretty well opened up right now. So let's move into the dining room and do some work in here. Before I can take down the wallboard on this side, I have to remove the chair rail. Again, the putty knife pry bar combination allows me to take off the wood trim without damage. With the trim off, I can begin removing the wallboard from this side of the wall. Well, there's no turning back now. Now the demolition can move on to the framing. First step is to cut the nails attaching the door frame using a reciprocating saw. I've decided to remove this overhead light switch since there's a duplicate just a few feet away. To remove the studs, I cut through the nails at the bottom, then pull the stud free. Next, I detach the old light switch box. The power has already been turned off. Now I can deactivate the circuit. My Japanese handsaw allows me to cut through the base plate without damaging the floor. Then it's just a matter of prying it up. Well, now I'm beginning to wonder if maybe this opening isn't too large. So I'm going to come up with some way to kind of adjust the size of it so Lynn and I can take a look at it to decide if we in fact want it this wide or maybe something in between this and what we had. So then what I've done is made up a full-size mock-up of the wall.
Okay.
All right? So let's put it here in place about where we started, which was something like this.
No, I think
this one?
definitely that's too close. That's better, just a little bit more over to towards the kitchen. No, I think a little bit wider than that. A little bit more wider. You know, I think that looks good, Ron. I think you should come take a look, though, just to get your impression as well.
Yeah. It kind of is on the same plane as this wall right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to work.
Yeah, I think, you know, you have that open feeling, but it still has definition to the room as in, you know, where the entryway is.
Yeah, okay. Well, like Pat said. Okay, let's do it. A quick trip for some lumber, and we're all set to start building. Get to work. What do you say? Let's come on. I've taken some wall studs out. Now I need to put a couple back. This shorter one, called a jack stud, will support the end of the new header that I'm making up by nailing 2x4s together. The ends of the header are attached in place with screws driven in at an angle, a process called toe nailing. These short stud pieces, known as cripple studs, distribute weight over the header and provide a nailing surface for the wallboard. Well, that takes care of the framing. I'd say it's time to button things up. I cut the drywall to size, fit it into place, and attach it with screws. Well, our wallboard is up. Now I'm going to turn my attention to covering these studs right here with solid pieces of wooden jamb. The top jamb piece goes up first. Then the sides. To make the side jambs perfectly straight and vertical, I insert pairs of shims every couple of feet. Then nail through the shims and into the 2x4 framing. With everything nailed in place, I cut off the protruding shims with a small Japanese handsaw. Now, in the same way that I used the door jamb to cover up the side of the 2x4 framing, I'm now going to use this casing to cover up the edge of the wallboard here. and conceal that joint. The power miter saw cuts 45-degree angles on the ends. Then the trim is set in position and nailed in place. We're pretty much finished with our wood trim except for putting back the trim that I took off earlier. Do still have to deal with this joint right here where we put in this piece of wallboard. So let's take care of that right now. This is what I call First, I apply what I call a bedding coat of joint compound. Then I wet the paper tape, lay it across the joint where the pieces of wallboard meet, and finally press the tape firmly into the compound. The trick here is to hold the knife at a low angle. Well, about all I have left to do is finish filling these nail holes, put on a coat of paint, put back on that molding that I took off earlier, and of course, get my wife's approval. What do you think?
I think it looks great. I think we really achieved what we were trying to. We definitely have that much more open feeling in this hallway where we don't feel like we're hitting a wall, and yet the dining room still has its own entryway. I think you did a great job.
You know, I'm always interested in finding a faster, easier way to refinish wood. A project like this chair, for example. So today, I'm going to check out this new product from Minwax. It's called Express Color. Now, this is both a wiping stain and a finish, all in an easy-to-use tube like this. The toughest part of this job is going to be deciding which of these 8 colors to use. Well, since this is a child's chair, I've narrowed it down to these 3 colors, and I think I'll choose this one. Anytime I'm applying a new finish, I make sure the surface is dust-free. In this case, just a wipe down with a clean cloth should do the job. Since this product uses pigments to produce colors, it's important to shake the tube thoroughly to make certain the ingredients are completely and uniformly mixed. To apply this combination stain and sealer, all I need do is squeeze a bit out of the tube and onto a soft cotton rag. Now, I happen to like terry cloth. I disperse the material into the cloth, then wipe it onto the surface. Almost always I start at the top of a piece and work my way down. If I have any drips or spills, I'll catch and fix them as I work downward. This is a paste-like stain and sealer, and I like that when I'm working on vertical surfaces like this. The thicker material tends not to run, giving me a lot more control when I apply it. While the cloth works well for flat or gently curved surfaces, it's really incapable of getting into details like the grooves in these turnings. For this, I prefer a bristle brush. The technique here is to first apply the stain to the cloth and then transfer it to the brush. This method keeps from overloading the bristles with too much stain. Whenever possible, apply stains and finishes by moving in the direction of the grain. This is especially important on larger flat surfaces like this seat. One of the things I like about this product is that it's supposed to clean up with soap and water. Now, to prove that to myself, I did not wear any gloves for this project, and instead headed to the sink for a real-life test. A bit of warm water and a bar of soap left me clean as a whistle. Well, you know, I was thinking, since this is a child's chair and I have so many colors to play with here, why don't I choose something different for the bottom? Maybe this. Well, the color may have changed, but the process is the same. I did discover something, though, while I was doing the bottom of the chair. I tried first finishing the grooves in the legs and stretchers with a brush, and then wiping the smoother sections with the cloth. This sequence seemed to make the overall color even more uniform. Well, here's a chance to have some real finishing fun with a whole palette of colors and a product that's really easy to use. This ever happened to you? You pick up a used can of wood filler, open the top, look inside, and it's all dried out. Well, here's a way to salvage it and keep it from happening again. Take a piece of sponge and cut off a small piece. and pour a little bit of wood filler solvent onto it. You can buy this where you buy the wood filler. Then after you finish using the filler, place the sponge inside the can, put the top on. Then the next time, when you're ready to use it, just take that sponge out. The filler is soft and good as new. For years, I've stored my screwdrivers in a drawer like this, and it's worked out okay. But I find that these are the most used tools in my shop, and I really would rather have them better organized and more visible. So we're going to build a screwdriver rack. The rack I have in mind will mount on my tool board and have two distinctive features: a slot that will allow screwdrivers to be slipped in place from the front, and a recessed socket that will capture the bottom of the handles. Now these are the 5 screwdrivers I use most often, and I've laid them out here on a piece of wood. In this case, I'm going to use poplar for this project. And what I want to do now is just a mark on each side of these. This is just for spacing. I draw a line parallel to the edge of the board, indicating how far from the front I want the screwdrivers placed. Then mark the center of each screwdriver location and extend a line back from the front edge. The point where these two lines intersect indicates the center position for each screwdriver. I select a Forstner bit, now you could use a spade bit, that's slightly larger in diameter than the handle. Then move to the drill press and bore a hole about 1/3 of the way through the board. I change the bit to a smaller size that's slightly larger than each screwdriver shaft, and drill completely through the board. Now I draw a line from the outer edges of the screwdriver shaft hole to the front edge of the board. The table saw blade is set just high enough to cut out the material between the smaller hole and the board edge. A miter gauge with a temporary fence allows me to accurately align the board on the cut lines. Now this cut can also be done on a bandsaw, or for that matter, even using a handsaw. I drill clearance holes near the rear edge of the rack top, then bore countersinks so that the heads of the screws I'll be putting in a moment will be flush with the top surface. Glue is then applied to a second piece of wood that's the mounting strip for the rack. The rack itself is placed on top and secured with screws. Finally, I bore holes in the mounting bracket that line up with those in the pegboard and attach the rack in place. Now, I've made a second one of these for my Phillips head screwdrivers. What I really like about racks is that everything is organized in sight and every tool has a home. If something's missing, I know exactly what it is. If you've got to cut several pieces of wood to the same length, here's a fast and accurate way to do it. Take a power miter box, attach it to a workbench like this, and then take some scrap wood and create a little stop block right here. That way when you make your cut, you put the wood up against the stop block and saw. Great thing about it, no matter how many of these you make, they're going to be exactly the same length.
To view today's projects again and countless more, go to HouseCallsDIY.com. Step-by-step home improvement tips when you need them.
I'm Brian Kelsey. Welcome to House Calls.
Join us as we tackle some great home projects, as well as look back at favorites from Ron Hazelton on House Calls.